They're twisting the text. They are trying to conceal its true meaning. We've heard, but their edits are shallow. The truth will out someday.
Peace of the Lord to all of you. Welcome. We're back with our brother John. Today we are going to conclude the exploration into the cave of Surah 18 in the Quran. So I think we already covered the first sections of that surah, and today John is going to actually talk us through the last one, and you can probably see with his name about who we're going to be talking about. So hello John, welcome back. Good to see you. How are you doing?
Oh yeah, well, God has been good. It's good to be back. Sorry, it has been a long break, and I know everyone's been itching for more. It's been a very eventful past month, and I was away because I had to do some preaching at my church, so that was good fun. And guess where we were? We were in the book of Acts, which we've been covering through this whole series. We've been finding references to the book of Acts, and so now it's great fun to take this deep dive and come to the surface of chapter 18. And a special shout out to Brother Norman. It was really great listening to your stream on this really badass channel, Quranic Endgame. All right, everyone ready to complete the exploration of the cave?
Yeah, so last time, I think if I remember correctly, so you discussed the verses that talk about Moses. There are some about Moses and the fish. So we went through those. We discussed as well the actual cave, the sleepers in the cave, and I think the other story. So this is the last section from Surah 18, which talks about a good friend of everyone's favorite polytheist, one of the most famous polytheists in human history, Zeus worshipper, Dhul Qarnayn. So there you go.
Yep, he certainly was very colorful, that guy, this Alexander the Great. And so this is but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to say that this story here, and I'm going to propose this suggestion, that this story, for that's what it is, it's a story, the story of Dhul Qarnayn, has been purposely placed in this chapter to reinforce the general message, or what we said before was a leitmotif. So it's the running theme of both this chapter and the Quranic text. And that what it does is it serves the purpose of reinforcing that leitmotif, which is that Christianity, biblical Trinitarian Christianity, is the triumphant over certainly its competitor, which was non-messianic Judaism that rejects Jesus as the Messiah and the sent one. And so what I left with you before was a great hot tip that in the same way we're reading this chapter, I recommend that the Quranic text as a whole should be read allegorically. And so this is essentially a story that is it's not because it's endorsing the story itself, but it's been made to serve a point. And so without further ado, shall we start unpacking? Because we're gonna have that. You'll notice there's a pink and then there's the grey, and I've essentially highlighted it for purpose, just like this story is here for purpose.
Yep.
You ready, brother JC?
Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit, and you can actually let me know as well when you want me to zoom in, zoom out, click. You let me know. You are the guest. I'm the chauffeur, so you tell me how to drive.
Excellent. All right, Matt, you're doing a fantastic job. So so we start with verse 86, where we see at the top, says, until when he, obviously that's Dhul Qarnayn, reached the setting place of the sun, and then, yep, blah, blah, and he found it setting in the spring and found at it a menfolk. And then we said, Dhul Qarnayn, either thou torment and either that thou take goodness in them. So I've highlighted that in the grey, because what I'm seeing is when we look at the story holistically, we find that the main purpose is to highlight the locations that this person, this Dhul Qarnayn, visits. So you'll notice that when we look through this story in general, there's actually 3 significant places that he finds himself in. And so what I want to say is, we keep hearing this, how it's being used as a polemic. It's like, oh, this must mean that the Quranic community thinks that the earth is flat and blah, blah, blah. What I'm going to say is taking a step back and just looking at why it's in this chapter 18, it's to highlight something more significant. It's the idea that Christianity has triumphed everywhere you could ever think of. So think of that as, again, allegorically, think of it as a figure of speech, where the idea of where the sun sets, the place where the sun sets, it's the furthest place in your imagination. So just imagine you're watching a beautiful sunset, and where it appears the sun is setting, in your mind's eye, that's and this is before the age of motor cars and planes and Batmobiles and all etc. etc. The idea is that that's the furthest place you can ever think of, and so at the furthest place that one can think of, this figure finds a group of people, and then that's where the pink comes in. Because what you'll notice about what's highlighted in pink from 87 to 88 is what we've already covered in our last episode, what we've seen previously. That the theme was the believer versus the unbeliever. And so it's like everywhere one goes, where this figure Dhul Qarnayn goes, there'll always be a paradigm of this group of people. Will they believe or will they disbelieve? Will they reject the message of the gospel? It's as simple as that. Because note verse 88, as for he who believed and worked correction, but that is a common theme, and those exact words are found through other chapters of the Quran, and we've already covered that at length. And essentially those who disbelieve, they have torment, which means that they suffer for their disbelief. And it's just that dichotomy, the division, and the contrast and comparison. So it really is as simple as that. There's nothing that complicated about that. What do you think before we look at the next two grey areas?
Well, what I would have, the first thing is a question. We know that Muslims say that Dhul Qarnayn is Alexander the Great. Well, that comes from other sources. And then they say he was a prophet of Allah, which of course is laughable because, as I said, he was a very, very famous polytheist. But is it possible, do you think, that the reason that they included this in the text is because this Christian heresy that was borrowing from all sources, they actually tried to make him as an example as well of something to do with, well, not Christianity, because Alexander the Great would be before, but to kind of join him. Basically, in other words, that now Muslims say Dhul Qarnayn is Alexander the Great and he was a prophet of Allah. Do you think that this heresy was saying Dhul Qarnayn is Alexander the Great and he was a prophet of the Abrahamic faith? And, that then developed into Islam? Or do you think that it had nothing to do with it? It was just a very nice story to say, hey, this guy went to all of the corners of the earth, including, where the sun sets, meaning the farthest distance. And people would understand that as, Christianity has spread out that much. At that point, it was from the Iberian Peninsula all the way to India, from countries, and then of course there were pockets everywhere else. So what do you think?
What you've just said, just that last bit, that was exactly you've basically reiterated the very purpose of this full episode. It's all about the whole chapter, and therefore this story is all about the triumph of Christianity. Because basically the first part we looked at on the first in the earlier installment was how Christianity was essentially hidden in a cave, so that the story of the sleepers, where it almost looked like that Christianity was about to die out by every visible metric and every humanistic visible metric. It was like a cave is where people get buried. I mean, that's what the significance of cave. Remember, Jesus was buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, and that was carved out of a rock. It's essentially a cave. So it follows on from where we started, and then the Dhul Qarnayn story is from the seed of what looks like utter defeat comes utter triumph. And so I absolutely agree with what you've just said. Now I want to add one more thing. So notice that to respond to this whole claim that Dhul Qarnayn is a prophet, where does it say that in the text? It doesn't say that anywhere in chapter 18. It just inserts this figure Dhul Qarnayn. It doesn't say he is a prophet or anything like that, or a messenger or anything like that. Where you have to read that into the text, but it doesn't say that anywhere.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time we've read something into the text, would it? For them, it's quite simple. If he is mentioned in the Quran, then it has to be a prophet of Allah. But of course, yeah, you're absolutely right. It doesn't say, "Oh, Prophet Dhul Qarnayn."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it just uses this character in the same way. Remember what we said about Moses and the companion, where it just says it just makes it so generic. It's as generic as you can get. It goes, one of our servants, and then Moses goes with that servant, because he just goes, Moses had a young boy or young male with him at the start, and then that young male never gets mentioned after that. So they encounter this person who's again, it's not even, that person's not even given a name, and then Moses and that servant goes, and there's 3 different events where it's supposed to be a test, and Moses just fails every one of them. So Moses gets 0%, and the whole idea is that it's a deliberate reworking, because it's using Moses as a figure to represent trying to take the Mosaic law by itself. It's incomplete. And we know that through other parts of the Quran, that because if you were to take it literally, then that contradicts everything that is said about Moses in other chapters of the Quran. So clearly, it's trying to convey a message about what it's allegorical. It's using a figure of speech to get you to think about the biblical message, that the Mosaic scriptures are incomplete without the meaning of the Messiah Jesus. And so we're going to see this continue. Or we're going to see this concept continue, where there's this Dhul Qarnayn figure that's being used as a literary device to communicate a literary truth. So it really doesn't matter who the identity of the Dhul Qarnayn, this figure. The text really doesn't care about it. And I know that sounds controversial, but it actually doesn't care about it. It only cares to make the one point: the triumph of biblical Trinitarian Christianity. So to reinforce that, So it's basically there's two more highlighted areas. So don't zoom in yet. Just so where it says the other grey part says, until when he reached the uprising place of the sun, he found it uprising over a menfold. Do you see where I'm going with this? Because the first part says the setting place of the sun, he found it in a spring and found a menfold. And now it goes, it's the opposite. So you've got two extremes. You've got where the sun sets and where the sun rises. And he finds a group of people. So, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
to
Let's see
continue.
if I follow. Let's see if I follow a little bit, like how you're joining this, if I may. So you think that this chapter is like allegorical. So it's saying, on the one hand, it's placing Moses as great as he was. He is going now to a servant, and Moses cannot figure him out. Basically, he keeps getting everything wrong. He's almost like giving the message of God knows best, and Moses, as great as he was, he still wouldn't understand the actual message of God because it was not complete. Then, when it's talking about the cave, everybody would know that it is a time when Christianity is just being prosecuted. Everybody is just being analyzed left, right, and center. And then these people go into a cave, they spend there like many, many years. Then they are resurrected, which scholars say is kind of imposing the resurrection of the body, which it was discussed very much at that point. So we have a point of Christianity being prosecuted. Then we do a roll forward, and then Christianity is superior at that point when they are out of the cave. And then they're linking that with Dhul Qarnayn, because he actually basically had expanded his empire basically to the whole known world, and that is now representative of Christianity. So Christianity, from the point of view of Moses knowing a lot but not knowing the grand plan, the sleepers on the cave joining the dot between at the time when Christianity was almost nothing to being superior, and then Dhul Qarnayn having got the vast amount of land representative of how Christianity looked. So you think that that's, am I getting that sort of right?
Yep, you've got 100. You've got it 100% correct, and that's exactly what I hope the audience can see. That this whole chapter, it's very easy to take out of context because the message is so simple. The details really don't matter. It's to get the point across that it is the triumph of the most unlikely circumstances from which biblical Christianity is like the seed that gets sown. It's the most unlikely hero, so to speak. And to reinforce that, we've got to remember what we said before about the book end. So chapter 18 begins and ends with the same, essentially with the same statement. What it is like imagine a seasoned preacher and seasoned Christian missionary coaching his protege or his trainee, and so he's basically giving this guy stories to try to help encourage him, and also warn him that not to be discouraged when it looks like no one wants to accept the message of the gospel. Because one of the key things was a tale of two men, where there was two people, one believed and one covered, and so we keep seeing that repeated through this chapter, and it also reinforces the point that it's like this missionary seems to be reaching the sons of Israel who are yet to respond to the gospel. And that's why that theme about those who cover is very important. And that's probably why there's that story about Moses and how it's incomplete without the gospel. So we add all these things up, you start to see that there's actually a coherence that makes more sense when you take this the simplest explanation, and you don't get caught up and distracted by the details. You just look at the themes that matter.
Yep. Okay. So far, this surah has never made any sense to me because there are these apparently disjointed stories, but the way that you have found how it would be a through line is actually phenomenal. So I really like this, and I can't imagine how you can actually have joined those dots, but you have. So thank you very much, and it's making sense. So far, this is the best explanation for this impossible surah that I have ever heard. Well done.
Excellent, thank you, brother. And so the very last thing I would just want to conclude on this Dhul Qarnayn story is if we just zoom in a slight bit towards the bottom at verse 93, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it out, and I'm just going to paraphrase the story to try to make it a modern, a modern context. So 93, until when he reached between the two plugs, he found apart from them both a menfolk who almost did not comprehend a saying. All right, so basically, when you add those two areas, you've got the place where the sun sets, the place where it rises, and then between the two plugs. And then this is a very interesting thing. It says, a menfolk who almost did not comprehend a saying. And so this is the key thing. What it is this figure goes to every place imaginable in one's context, whether you have air travel or you don't have air travel. Think of the extremes of where one can go from Jerusalem, where the gospel had gone forth. So you can go to a place, to the most obscure place where there's not even a word between you, and yet the gospel is understood and the gospel is even accepted by a few of these people. And to explain the pink, there will always be people who reject, who cover, and there will always be believers. So when one considers the triumph of the gospel, it's remembering that it's not your efforts. It's because God has promised, as per chapter 355, that Jesus is the fulfillment of the scriptures, and that those who follow the Messiah Jesus are made uppermost. So that no matter where you go, whether you look left, right, north, south, east, and west, God's promise has been fulfilled. So I'll get you to zoom out and think about what I want to do is bring back a couple of biblical passages, because I think you've got to zoom out to 100% and then click next. And I'll read two passages. So the first one is Daniel chapter 2, which is basically, the story of Nebuchadnezzar, where he basically sees a vision. And so I'll just simply read a short portion of it. I'll just see from verse 44 to 47. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. Actually, so forgive me for a second. I'm just going to go a bit earlier, just because I realise that it doesn't explain what it is that I'm trying to get the point across. So let me just. Okay, so I'll go from verse 31. Your Majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold. its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. So this was the dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. Your Majesty, you are the King of Kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds in the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are that head of gold. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron. So this will be a divided kingdom, yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united, any more than iron mixes with clay. So do you see where this is going with Daniel chapter 2, about the rock that smashes these human kingdoms and fills the earth? And then you see that wherever this figure goes, but the Christian message has already reached these menfolk.
Yes, and I can see here, I don't know actually if you were going to discuss it later, but they put Dhul Qarnayn together with Gog and Magog, which is supposed to be about the end times. So this is actually supposed to then say Moses with that guy, so the scripture is not complete at that point. Then the sleepers in the cave, from Christians being prosecuted to being uppermost to Dhul Qarnayn. So it's not chronological, it's really allegorical, like you said, with Dhul Qarnayn being everywhere and then joining all the way to the end of times. So it does feel like they're touching all of these themes that joins all the way from Moses to the end of times. So yeah, I think I see where you're coming from. This is very, very, very interesting and very, very cool.
It is, yeah. It's pretty awesome. Yeah. So and I think so. What I'll do is I'll just finally read like the Great Commission. So it goes, like Matthew 28 says in verse 18, actually from 16. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age." And so, yeah, again, it's the idea of going forth and making disciples and believers of all people where one can go. Yeah, and I think it is. Look, I think it's interesting about that the whole thing about that Yajuj and Majuj and that stuff. But for me, what I'd think is that essentially the gospel triumphs over evil and corruption, and so there's really not much to think through with that. Again, it's just those sorts of like details where the story was just given as a whole to illustrate a point. So what I'm going to try and push is people to think this through. So we've already said before, and the theme of this series is that the Quranic text acts as an apocrypha. So what it's going to do is you should expect it to take stories that it doesn't necessarily endorse. For example, when I'm saying stories, I'm saying something like Little Red Riding Hood and the Gingerbread House. It's not to say, okay, I'm quoting the story because I believe that there was a little, someone named Red Riding Hood and there was a real gingerbread. But I'm trying to get the moral of the story across, like the key themes of that story, which is don't trust strangers. And if there's someone that's a wolf dressed up as a nice person offering you candy, don't go in that house. So it's that same concept being applied to this story of Dhul Qarnayn, of all the stories within the three major stories in chapter 18. And actually there's a fourth, because there's the tale of two men, like the parable of the one who believes and the one who covers. So all these stories flow together to make a single unified point or leitmotif. So, yeah. So you ready for the bonuses? Because I've got some very cool things to show you and when we wrap up the this episode.
Yeah, may I just point out one thing before moving on? With Matthew 28, by the way, one of my favorite verses is Matthew 28:19, as one of my favorites for so many reasons we'll discuss at some point. But when you actually read from 16, so in 16 or 17, you read like they saw him and they worshiped him, but some of them did not believe. Those words, how many times do we see that in the Quran where it says something exactly like this? Like people believe and some of them did not believe. Like it's almost like they copied that from Matthew, that exact, whether it was verse 16, 17, or 18, is that appears everywhere in the Quran, right?
100%, and that's what we're going to cover in a later episode, one of our final episodes, because there's always going to be a mixed response. So the Bible demonstrates that, just like the parable of the sower, that whether the seed is sown, there's different. Some will grow, some will not grow, some look promising, and there's basically four key responses. And actually, so in Matthew 28, and these are the disciples that are seeing Jesus after he has risen, and yet some believe, some are still in doubt, and that's the cool thing, because it's almost like it's a way of speaking about, because this is Matthew's account of the Matthew's account. The Gospel according to John covers that more in detail, so it could actually be referring to Thomas, because it's only a brief line that says some doubted, and then you go to John, the last chapter of John, where Thomas doubted because he hadn't seen, and then you see the unity of the four Gospels. I mean, it's pretty powerful when you think of it. But where the Quran goes with that is that it keeps speaking about. It says, like, of the sons of Israel, a circumambulating group of them believed, and a circumambulating group of them covered. And you'll see that saying, some believed and some covered, but those who believed made them the uppermost. Or so, for example, you'll see that in the end of chapter 61, which we've looked at in an earlier episode, and what else? Chapter 355 is where we see that, and many more places. It's that God empowers the believers in Jesus the Messiah through His Holy Spirit to take the gospel to the nations and throughout the world.
Yeah, I'm very happy with your explanation of Surah 18, which has never made any sense, and now at least I can see how those seemingly disjointed stories actually would make sense to an audience if they would see it in that way. And also the story of Alexander the Great, I think the reason why they would have used that, assuming that that is what it was always meant to mean, it was a popular story. So they would take a story that everybody has heard about, and they would just actually turn it into this allegorical story of Christianity, just a little bit like they had done with other stories like Solomon and Sheba. They just tell the story better to fit characters that people know in order to convey a message. So in this case, everybody knows about Alexander the Great. They would use it like this. That makes perfect sense to me.
Excellent. All right, fantastic. So I want to let the audience be the judge. So if you hit the next slide, yeah. So exactly, what do you think, to everyone in the chat, the cave is all about? And I do recommend this channel. So if you hit next, it'll show up. If you haven't seen these videos from this channel called Nabi Asli, and and you'll really see like the simplicity of this the message. So it basically will just explain graphically what's sort of going on. So you'll see these are pretty cool things. So this is Nabi Asli, and so I do recommend checking out those two videos. I mean, obviously, it's Nabi Asli goes to show what this brother does is that the videos are trying to depict what's written in the standard narrative and in the hadith. So there's that bit going on, but I can recommend these two videos to really think through what we've learned in this episode. So we'll head on to the next slide unless you want to say anything. Yeah, so this is what the channel looks like, and I think they do Indonesian as well, if that's your native language. All right, so there's going to be a couple bonuses. So if you hit next, you're going to see something interesting. So now, of course, you all read the Saint Murad Quran. You hit next, you'll notice that there's always this little symbol here, this little bad boy. Now, I want you to start thinking, this is not Islamic. So start thinking, what if that symbol there is actually inspired by these two mosaics that predate the one mosaic that was discovered in February this year, and that was discovered in like northern Israel, and it's basically a messianic synagogue. So it's simply put, it's the early church that met in a synagogue in Israel, and you'll see this beautiful symbol, a beautiful mosaic, which I reckon this has come from. So I mean, how can you not unsee that? I mean, you can see those 4 diamond points, and because it's in a square, you can imagine that there would be a point up and above, and there'll be another point there and there, and then of course, if you click next again, you'll see that I'm pretty sure this was obviously based on that. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty beautiful, isn't it? So,
this is identical. This is copy paste. Actually, I suppose that Murad has actually added this, and this is the actual symbol that they use in the Quran in Arabic, and they have used that one
correct.
forever. That they didn't just, get to the 15th century and then they said, hey, we need a symbol to separate this, and then they copied. So I want to assume that this was a very early thing, and if that's the case, come on, another copy paste. Look at this, man.
Yeah.
This is insane.
Yeah, exactly. It is. It just gets boring, doesn't it? They always copy pastes. But yeah, but what do we expect? I think we've learned, what to expect. So yeah. All right. Well, so that's a pretty cool. But the second bonus is to talk about Jubayil. So to really emphasize the theme of this chapter. See, this is in Saudi Arabia, Jubayil, and so it's about. I'll show you on a map in the next slide, northwest. I mean, look, come on, is that symbol Islamic? you know that. Yeah, that's totally that's a total Muslim sign.
Of course, Alhamdulillah.
Yep, absolutely. Exactly. Yeah. So and yeah, so I actually heard about it through Lloyd's live stream with Usama when he's pretty sure he brought that up because he's basically saying that the history is showing that it was Christianity that was throughout throughout the Arabian Peninsula. And that's exactly what 355 is all about. You know, the believers are triumphant. See, this is what remains. But you could imagine back in the heyday, this was designed for a a communal place where because they say it's essentially a monastery, and what that would mean is actually they would train, and that's where it is. It's north west in the red. So what they'll do is they'll build these magnificent structures. I mean, look, remember what I said in the earlier episodes. Would you build a huge complex for only one family of 10 people? Like, that doesn't make sense. Who builds some of a large area for when you're the minority of minorities? No, what it actually meant was the church continued to grow to the point where they said, let's build a place that we can train and send people out. So that red area I've highlighted. If you go towards southwest, the United UAE, we've already seen earlier that there was a Christian monastery uncovered sort of around that around that area. And then we already know, so basically this area is like Arabia Desertica, because you deserter. So you've got three Arabias. You've got Arabia Petraea, which is Syria, Roman Arabia, so Syria, Jordan, Israel, Lebanon, Iraq, and then you've got Arabia Desertica, and then I've put a little green dot that's just above Yemen, and so that's basically what they say is Arabia Felix, so happy Arabia, and that is Najran. Najran is, of course, a historical Christian community where there is, of course, the monastery. So look, let's think about it. So we've got three big points of this Arabian Peninsula. Are you seriously who's going to really believe that you've got, Jubail up there, you've got a huge Christian presence in Najran in the south and towards the west of the UAE? Are you seriously going to expect me to believe that there's no Christian communities anywhere in between where Medina and, Makkah or Taif? That's just rubbish. If you're going to be building huge monasteries in all these areas, Christianity would have spread everywhere in between. And it only proves the point. That's what the Quran was speaking about. The believers have triumphed over those who disbelieve the gospel. Let's ask a different question. We're uncovering in this area all these historic churches. How many synagogues and yeshiva schools have been uncovered? Let's just say, in 20 years' time, we discover all that can be discovered archaeologically. There will probably be 100 churches within this whole, or even more, and then there'll be maybe 5 or so synagogues. This is the sort of proportion that we're sort of thinking of. The gospel has triumphed over those who rejected it. So yeah. Any thoughts? Yeah.
Well, thank you for this map. I really like maps. It makes everything really easy for everyone to understand when we just see. You're absolutely right. So we're finding that in here, and the date that you had above is that it was around the year 300, which then, of course, it begs the question, what were they reading? If you have a monastery, you have a Bible, and you have missionaries, and they are going to be going everywhere. So it's not going to be this place in here, and then you have 3 monks living in there and never getting out of there. they are preaching to the population. So
Yep.
that we know, great.
Absolutely.
And like you said, UAE, Najran as well, which it was hub for heresies, but also a lot of Christianity, also in Yemen, and also we have in Eritrea and here in just across the channel, they were Christians. We have even
Yep.
the Ethiopic Bible, for example, we have it from
Yep.
before the time of Islam. These areas, all of them, they had been Judaized first and then Christianized. So the thing is, when you look at the maps, if you go online to Google and say Christianity in the 7th century, all of them, every single map will show all of this area that is in light yellow is going to show like no Christianity from here anywhere, not even in Yemen and Oman. That is because of the narrative. The Quran, well, the Islamic narrative is saying that all of that was pagan. So when you look at maps about the spread of Christianity, they all say, nope, no Christianity here. All of this was pagan. Now we know that that's not the case. And Gabriel Reynolds has sometimes people on his channel that actually speak about this, that they have found inscriptions that really indicate that pagans were pretty much gone from this region 200 years before Islam. So by the time that we got to Islam, there would have been, three pagans in the whole region. They were no pagans. They were Jews, they were Christians, and of course there were other heresies, but certainly not pagans. And the whole story of Islam is supposed to be around pagan lands. So I don't know when the maps will start to change and they will accept in the world that all of this had been Christian. I reckon that Islam has to collapse first before they update the maps, because once we realize that all of this is Christian, then nothing would make sense. Muhammad wouldn't get away with saying stories about, for example, the one about Mary being part of the Trinity. He wouldn't get away with it. All of these people are Christian, therefore he would just be, ridiculed by everyone. Only in pagan lands he would get away with it, and now we know these were not pagan lands. So, but yeah, great map, and you're right. Here, 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 and here, and here, all of that region was Christian, and in here, even though most of it is desert, it I mean, can you imagine what is going to be pagans in a little region like this in the middle? According to what we are finding, there were no pagans anymore. They had to be Christians. These guys in Jubail, they probably just went everywhere preaching.
Yeah, and as you can imagine, along with preaching and missionary activities, is Bible translation wherever it was needed. So yep, that's a big thing. Yeah, and praise God. As Brother Odon says, by the end of the first and second century, basically, the Apostle Thomas went as far east as China and India. So he took the Silk Road, perhaps through Central Asia, China, and India. And the Apostle Paul went to Rome and further west to Spain. So that's, and then of course we already know the Ethiopian eunuch going to bring the gospel through the Ethiopia, and Egypt being very heavily Christianized, and Iran sending more missionaries to China and Tibet. Like, there you go, and Europe. But we're due for another revival soon. But yeah, we can really see the gospel is triumphant, has always triumphed, and will always triumph.
Yeah, and actually, like you said, so imagine, so Jerusalem is right in here, and then from there, in just a couple of 100 years, we had missionaries all the way in the Iberian Peninsula. They have probably reached like much of Africa, certainly the north of Africa, and they are pushing for the south. They have reached China. They are everywhere, but they didn't get right here. They didn't get to Petra. It's like, no, guys. And also, we have here Egypt, which was Christianized. We have, well, all of this region here in East Africa that were Christianized. So everything was Christianized. But then we have this pocket of pagans. It's like, come on, these people were in continuous trade and continuous contact with all of these Christians everywhere. So the Christians would have been successful absolutely everywhere, but you still have a handful of people here, a whole kingdom that they are still pagans. It's like, no, there would be Bedouins, certainly, people who actually travel these lands. The say little kingdoms or tribes, they change a lot. They actually were moving boundaries all the time. There were lots of Bedouins, but
Yep.
the whole region was Christianized. It's like, and more evidence is coming up. I mean, the evidence that is coming up is not, oh, look, there was actually a pocket of pagans right here or right there. No, everything that is coming out is it was Christian, which is interesting.
Yep. Amen. And that was with, and it's a pretty impressive area. How the gospel has gone forth that early without the internet, and they achieved all that without the internet. They just went everywhere to spread the gospel, north, south, east, and west. Yeah, we've got to give these early church missionaries, fathers, and the apostles credit. So praise God for their obedience to spread the gospel everywhere. And you're right, those Bedouin nomads. If it would only have taken one or two or three Bedouin families to have been discipled and given the gospel, and they themselves would go reach other nomadic herdsmen who would then tell other people the gospel. So that's how it worked. You had tradesmen, traveling merchants that would just take the gospel everywhere they went, and over food, over coffee, whatever. Yeah.
The camel route, the trade route would have gone, actually, I think it is from basically here, Sana, so Christian, Najran, Christian, and then it will get to Taif, and they are all going just around a stone, and it's like, no, and then all the way here to Medina, all the way to the north. So you would have like 4 or 5 oasis cities in here, which are incredibly pagan, even though they are trading with the Christians on the other side, in the south, in the north, and it's like, no, guys, like this would have been very Christian, and we don't have Bibles. We know why. Once Islam actually appears, they start to destroy everything. So that makes absolute sense. And actually, it wouldn't surprise me if, when we look into the Quran more and more, we find more and more of Paul. I mean, you have shown quite a lot of Paul already, in the themes of Paul in the Quran. It wouldn't surprise me, because am I right in thinking that he was the first one to actually travel south to the Arabian lands, or was there another apostle who actually got there before Paul? But I know Paul did.
Yeah, well, I think because, and that's what I think with the Apostle Paul, when it says he went to Arabia, because that's in Acts 13, and in Galatians, Paul describes his journey where he was on his. So what he meant was Paul went to Arabia, Petraea, which is Syria, and in the Levant, because it talks about in Acts. I think it's Acts 13 where he is journeying. I think it's a bit early. I think it's Acts 9, because he basically is on the road to Damascus, which is obviously from Jerusalem to Damascus. So he's going north to that Arabia. But church tradition has it that it was either Mark or Barnabas who went to what we today call Arabia deserter. So basically, there would have been one of the apostles. I think it was either Mark or I think it was, what was the other one's name? Maybe Thaddeus. He went down to Petra, and then went south to far southern Arabia, like Arabia Felix, like Yemen. So he would have traveled the caravan route, camel route, and caravan route.
And go all the way to Mecca. Yeah, right. No, not yet.
Yep.
But
right.
Right.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it does make me think whether when they start actually spreading the gospel, whether they would have a particular affinity to particular apostle because he was the one that actually traveled south. As we know, there are in many regions where a particular apostle is still very much prominent in their churches and stuff, because that was the apostle that went there and established the church, and then they still have that as the saint of that region for that reason. So I do wonder if at one point we find a particular apostle described in the Quran and hidden, of course, because they would have had more of the sayings of that particular apostle, because he was the one actually traveling in those lands just a few hundred years prior. So maybe we'll keep an eye out for that, and maybe we'll find some cool stuff.
Yep, that's it. God willing, that will the truth will out. So that's it. Yeah. All right. So the next slide, it's a wrap. Yeah. Well. So I'm going to make this. This is actually our last bonus episode because yeah, what these bad boys are, who these bad boys, uncovering the coverers, the kuffar, the mushrikin, and the darkeners. That's going to be a main episode because it is a big theme in the Quranic text. So I'm going to treat it as like a main episode, and so that will be coming very soon. It'll be the second last episode, and then the very final one will be geography that will tie everything together. And so yeah, so I think it's a pretty cool wrap. Yeah. Yep.
Great. I really look forward to that. So next time you're going to kuffar, the word kuffar and mushrikun and darkeners. That's very good.
Darkness. Very good. Yes. Yeah. Oops, I think I misspelled darkeners, but yeah, you get the point. Come on. That's what happens when that's what happens when you're working in a cave. No, just kidding.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, darkeners. Yes, close enough. That's close enough. We know what it means, and we can correct that on the next one. But that's phenomenal. Okay, so John, this has been a phenomenal series with the cave. Like I mentioned before, it takes particular courage to try to make sense of Surah 18, because on the face of it, it makes zero sense. There are just a number of stories completely disjointed. They seem to mean nothing. They seem to come from different traditions, and you have managed to unpack that and say, okay, if we look at the minimum amount of information that people would read from each of these stories, and then we join those dots, it would make sense. They're just explaining clearly, hey, Christianity starts with Moses. He's not complete, great as he is, but there are still things that he doesn't know. Then we have the sleepers in the cave joining the Christians being persecuted and being basically the underdogs, to a point where Christianity is now everywhere, to conquering the whole world through the story of Dhul Qarnayn. 3 different stories that join together, we see the theme. So that's phenomenal. This is the best attempt at explaining why those stories are there in Surah 18 I have ever heard. So thank you very much, John, for your hard work, and it's been phenomenal. I look forward to the next episodes.
All right. Yep. We'll keep them coming, and it's good. It's going to be glad everyone's enjoying it, and so yep, that's it. God bless you all, and yeah, we'll be cooking up soon. Cooking soon. Time to get out of that cave.
Yeah, so next time we get out of the cave and we talk about the darkeners in the cave. So thank you very much, John. It's been phenomenal. And let's actually do the next session as soon as we possibly can. So for everyone watching, I hope that you have actually enjoyed this. If you have any thoughts about all of this material, make sure that you leave the comments, your comments in the comment section below, so that John can pick them up and address them. If you notice other things that we haven't addressed, maybe we've shown verses and there are some key clues somewhere, please let us know as well, because we're trying to get to the truth and we didn't get there yet. Otherwise we would have stopped. So if you notice anything, please let us know. And for now, we will just leave you here. Thank you very much all for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful week ahead. God bless you all. See you all soon. Bye-bye.
There is only one Quran, right? Every Quran in the world is the same. That's what you've been told. You have been told a lie!
Canonical, someone tried to
different Quran.
There are 0 Dawa guys apparently left on the planet who are willing to defend Muhammad in a debate.
Everybody can go and read it. This is a book full of mistakes in Arabic, in the grammar, in the spelling, in the pronunciation.
Whoever wrote the Quran made an error because they didn't quite understand what was written in the 7th century in the Torah and the Injil.
Stay away from these translations. They are propaganda.
We know that stories about Muhammad were made up on an industrial scale.
What in the world is this Injil?